I think the biggest thing is having to say no to people, because there are so many people that want to help and there are so many people that need help, but we have limited resources and energy, and we need and we have a particular set of skills that are really quite useful at this juncture in time.
Welcome. Thank you so much for being part of today's very special World Extreme Medicine live session on the Ukraine convoy that Mark and Luca put together. By way of introduction, we have two incredible members of the WEM faculty and, in fact, fellows in extreme wilderness medicine. Here with us today, we have Mark Hannaford, founder and CEO of the World Extreme Medicine organization, as well as Luca Alfatti, who has an incredible background as an extreme medic, who has trained as a paramedic. He has been on hundreds of expeditions. And what we're going to talk about today, some of you who may have been following along Mark and Luca's journey since the whole invasion of Russia into Ukraine began, we know that the mantra of WEM is where humans go, medicine must follow, and that includes war zones. So when the Ukraine conflict and humanitarian crisis first arose, WEM leapt into action. So I think I'm going to leave it there, and then maybe Mark and then Luca chiming in. Just tell us about what has transpired on the WEM side, what you did with the convoy, and tell us how this went from conception to getting the first convoy done and planning for many more. So Mark, I'll get you to start, and then Luca, to add your thoughts as well.
Thank you, Shawna. It's been very much a team effort, I have to say. The WEM has a unique network of people both in its faculty, but also in its much wider community that have a pretty incredible range of skills. And we held off doing anything for the first initial period because, in our own teachings, we talk about the fact that actually in terms of responding to situations like this, be it a war zone, a disaster, humanitarian crisis, the big agencies do a good job. And what blocks the logistical chain is people turning up willy-nilly with random supplies, all well-meaning, but they can actually become an impediment to getting help to people that need it most. So we held back. But given the fact that, as I said, WEM has a fairly eclectic and massive network of people with some really incredible connections and skills, we spotted a gap where that skill set would be really meaningful and well used, and that was running trauma supplies at a high level to the front line, be that the units on the front line or civilians affected by the conflict. So with Luca's help, we built a kind of really specialized, really targeted, and actually quite quick series of convoys that are going into the Ukraine and delivering medical aid, trauma aid to those people, those essentially our medical colleagues on the front line who need it most. Luca, I don't know whether you want to join in and talk through how we've kind of evolved this, because it has been very much an evolution, and it feels like we've grown really rapidly. To be honest, somebody asked me the other day how much of my time this now takes up, and I reckon probably about 150%. It's quite an interesting intellectual challenge and emotional challenge as well. But Luca, how about from your side?
Yeah. So hi, good evening, everyone. So it has snowballed million times fold from what Marcus said. Basically, yes, we waited, and like everyone else, there's been everyone sitting at home. It's like, what can I do? What can I do? I know I've got the skills, the set to maybe help somehow. It was just like how that was the main, how are we going to do this? And just looking back at what WEM did a few years back with the convoy in Syria, we just thought, well, what they're really needing, what they're asking for is medical supplies. And there is, and just following up from Mark, actually, there is a huge concerted effort from the big organizations and governments, and they're all doing a fantastic job. However, without getting into details of politics, things sometimes slow down. So we, with our contacts and with a lot of time and a lot of time on the phone and on WhatsApp and Signal and so on, we have individualized like a quite neat small group of doctors, nurses, but also logisticians, not necessarily medical professionals. And we basically just respond to direct needs and lists that come from the front line. And we also got a couple of other things that have really gone down really well with the help of a lot of partners. This is not just Mark and mine effort, it's a WEM effort, and there is a lot of other partners actually involved with this. And they've all recognized the expertise that we can bring. And basically, we've got a couple of things actually that are really our target, and is trauma boxes, stop the bleeds kits, and basically anything that is like trauma, frontline clinics and hospitals. And basically, after we managed to put together the very first convoy a couple of weeks ago and came back from that, that's when the things have really exponentially grown, and now we've got loads of other partners that come into place, and everyone has got their own little bit of of a bigger machine, if you like, and we're actually getting ready to set off in the next 24 to 48 hours again.
And this is a great starting point, because I have so many more questions, but I want to pick up on two things that both Mark and Luca said. So Mark, I want to start with kind of talking about what you alluded to very correctly. In a conflict zone, there are so many moving pieces, and it's kind of dealing with this push-pull of, yes, there are going to be big organizations going in who have the networks there, who know, this needs to be done. And then at the individual level, there's the, hey, I want to do something. I feel I should do something, but we also know, Mark, as you alluded to, that it's not as simple as saying, hey, I'm going to be here to save the day, because that actually often confounds the situation more. If you're unused to, inexperienced with conflict zones, you have to find that right niche of, where can I help? Am I the best person to help? Am I experienced enough to do this, and can I guarantee, myself and my team's security? So you alluded to it a little bit, but Mark, I wonder if you can go into talking about how you've finessed that. Hey, this is need for trauma supplies. This is a gap we can fill.
I think it actually came out of an evolving conversation between Luca and I about what we could do. When we went to Syria and supported the People's Convoy there, we fulfilled a role that was security and logistics. The aim of that convoy was very targeted and very precise. Once the last children's hospital in Aleppo had been bombed, we helped to deliver a pediatric sort of hospital on a truck that was sent into Syria, and for pediatric care. And we started off the Ukraine with the same precept, actually, that actually we would be best suited to deliver trauma and pediatric sort of supplies and stuff. But that's morphed and changed and become much more focused as the situation in Ukraine itself has changed. So we're very much focused on trauma. And I think the lesson there is, and I think Luca would agree, is we went in with a mission in mind, but actually that's become very much more refined and targeted as we progress. And I think that's really useful. We've wanted to prevent what's called mission creep, where you kind of say yes to sort of ever increasing demands outside of your broad, what you set as a remit at the beginning. And we've been quite strict in trying to keep to our mission. And I think that's useful in a number of different ways. It's allowed us to focus our resources, time and energies on something very specific, it also gives people on the outside a very clear understanding of what it is we are there to do, both on the Ukrainian side, but also on the domestic side. And on the domestic side, clearly that's very useful for fundraising and people understanding what it is we are trying to address. Luca, I don't know whether you'd like to add anything else to that or to add on to that.
No, it's pretty much that, and the specificity of it is that we got we speak with the frontline doctors, paramedics, and healthcare professionals, and yes, everyone all across the country needs the same thing in huge quantities. However, we can target what we think is most needed, specific, or we can just do some sort of intervention specific to what they need. And it can be different stuff. So it's not like anything from, as I said, the 2-1 boxes that we put together with Festival, for example, they are a big hit. They're really useful in that sense. But there is all the tonic cases, the hemostatic agents, and so on, that, as we know, they're needed in massive quantities. However, they're really hard to deliver in big Arctic trucks, for example, as maybe many big organizations are trying to do. So we've got our small little network of specialists within the country, including, as I said, logisticians and medics. And we know that within 24 hours of us delivering out, the things that we take over there, they get to the front line, to the place, to the hospital that need it most, or we think we need it most. So we are a small part of a big operation, but we are getting the feedback, is helping, is useful. Please bring more.
Absolutely. And I have a few more questions that I want to get to, but I also want to remind the audience that this is your hour. So if you have questions for Mark and Luca, just put them in the chat and we will make sure that they get asked as time allows. So the second question I wanted to ask was, Luca, you'd alluded to the Syrian convoy. So were there lessons learned from putting together that convoy that at least laid the groundwork for getting this convoy off the ground and, into operations? Was it vastly different? Was it maybe not translatable? How did those two experiences compare?
Well, to be fair, I wasn't actually fully involved with the Syrian convoy. It's just something that I followed very, very closely, and that's where the ideas came from. But obviously, Mark was on that convoy as well, and he actually drove all the way there. So I actually feel it's probably better for Mark to answer this question. Mark, what do you think?
Well, I think we played a supporting role in the Syrian conflict. Rolla Hallam headed up that convoy, and I think what we learned we took away from that convoy, and other things that we've done since, like supporting the Myanmar medical community during the coup, is that there's a desire to help because you react as a human and emotionally to what's going on there. But you need to have value, and you shouldn't be getting in anybody's way. So you've got to be quite strict with yourself to ensure that you have a relevancy there. Because if you're not relevant in that environment, in that crisis, then all you are is an impediment to other people getting help there. So it's being relevant, making sure that what you can provide and what your speciality is one that's needed. The other bit is, and I think, as I said in the first paragraph, is staying sharp to what it is you want to do and not sort of taking on too much, because it allows people, both either side of the equation, to understand how they can help you, but also how you can help them. So I think that's the biggest takeaways. The other bit is that actually communication is essential in order to garner support. These funds, as probably most people probably know, the donations that come in, World Extreme Medicine underwrites all the costs of the operation, but we do rely on fundraising in terms of being able to finance buying the supplies. And so communication with your fundraiser is also critical. And Luke and I have set a network up where we will ask for evidence of delivery, so that actual deliveries are accountable as well. And one thing you might want to speak about, Luca, is that there's no harm policy with the equipment that we're sending out that you've developed with Dr. Joe Roll.
Yeah, so there is as you would expect, the more we successful in what we're doing, the more obviously requests we're getting. And we're getting quite a lot of requests that are not really medically related. We can get anything from like bullets to vests to helmets and all of this stuff. Would you be able to get it to us? So we've been very, very clear and very strict to the fact that all we're going to deliver is medical supplies and nothing else, just because we know who we're delivering into and we know where they get to. It's still a war zone. So we don't know if anything gets intercepted. It's just like everything will, it's basically our no harm sort of like policy. We're going to stick to what we know as well. That's what we know. We know medicine. We know what we can provide, and we're just going to stick to that. I think that's what you meant, Mark, isn't it?
Well, I was thinking it wasn't what I meant, but actually that was a great thing to say. It was the fact that the kit was supplying in terms of using Penfrox in terms of.
Yes, sorry. So we're also, as I said, later we come up with this idea with Joe, actually the medical director, assistant medical director as well, to try to provide a mini kit, if you like, that is a stop the bleeding kit, I like to call it, and it's basically Penfrox for pain relief right there and then, which is very, very effective. And then we're going to provide TXA, tranexamic acid, which is for the ones that are just a drug that's really effective and is becoming really, really common hospitally to give to any major trauma patients, which they can inject themselves on intramuscularly with a minimal training. And ceftoflaxin as well, like antibiotics that they can again inject themselves intramuscularly right there and then, just to start the process. On top of that, we are delivering a lot of hemostatic agents. We had like £450,000 donation of quick clot salixes as well, quick clot hemostatic agents. So we're basically focusing on this stop the bleed trauma first intervention, and then with the trauma boxes we're looking at that sort of like few 100 meters back, sort of like control from like tourniquets to field dressing, bandages, and field stretchers, if you like, to then be moved to a little bit of a more like definitive care.
What we were concerned about, Shawna, is that by delivering medical supplies without any clinical governance above what we were doing would mean that potentially we were delivering equipment that could be reused improperly and could cause harm rather than. So we've been, quite careful in terms of, what we are sending to make sure the clinical boxes go to clinicians, but anything else, anybody using it shouldn't be able to harm themselves more than gaining benefit.
And we're also working, to be fair, we're also working on training. So we will be delivering a training on what we are actually giving them as well to clinicians. And it's something that needs to be said, like frontline, there's not a huge amount. No, we think about like our army organized with like loads of like medics, paramedics, nurses, and so on and so forth that join the front line. A lot of the armies in Ukraine is also people that just enrolled, civilians and so on and so forth. So they're not necessarily every single unit going to have medics frontline. It's just not happening, not possible. So we're looking at a bit of training for medics, and then can sort of like trickle that training down to whoever is frontline. And even to be fair, in my head, even if we save one or two, we've done a good job, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a perfect time to get into one of the questions that has come up from the audience. They're wondering about the composition of the team. So, Luca, you're a paramedic as well as an extreme medic, as well as an expeditionist. Mark, you've been wherever if there's an extreme place, you've been to it. Who has this convoy so far been the two of you? Have there been other medics or EMTs or physicians on these convoys to date?
Well, the lead for our next convoy is an eye surgeon, pub. There, I'm actually waiting for a phone call tonight. So we've got delivery happening. If I need to get on the phone, sorry, guys, I apologize. And then I had another paramedic with me and Mark on our first convoy. But it's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be necessarily a medical professional. So there is an element of us, there is quite a few of us, which obviously help us in putting together the kit, the convoy. We know what we're taking. But we had loads of help from like driving, for example, to in country is actually a logistician. That is not a medic, that is looking at making sure that we get all the paperwork rights, that we get all the permits that we need. And we've got a lovely lady called Svetlana, for example, has become sort of part of the team with us. That's not a medic, but is a civilian, Ukrainian civilian that has been, since the war began, basically, has been helping getting supplies in between Poland and Lviv. So yes, there is paramedics, there is doctors, there is the whole WEM family behind it from a clinical perspective, but we're not at the moment delivering frontline medical care. That's not what we're looking at doing. We are delivering medical supplies and we're providing training to the Ukrainians to then do what they need to do.
So from end to end, take us through a convoy, and both of you have some amazing photos and images and videos on your social media after the fact, once you've been off the hot zone, of something of what the convoys looked like. But take us through like what that first convoy was from deciding to start. You were driving for something like 18 hours a day. What you did for security. How often, were you genuinely threatened for your security? How often were you on high alert? I would love to hear about that. So maybe Luca, we'll start with you and then go over to Mark.
Yeah, I can cover like the putting together of it, if you like. And we basically just came up with the idea, put something on, a few messages to friends and family, social media, and so on. And basically, we were able to pretty much fill up the whole of the first convoy with very high quality medical donations, actually. The first convoy was 4 drivers, myself, Mark, Peter, and Mike, and 2 large, long wheelbase sprinters, basically filled to the brim with medical supplies. And then we basically just drove, yes. So we set off, we loaded up ourselves up here in Manchester, where I'm based. And then we drove, I think, an average of about 16 hours a day, if I'm not wrong, Mark, but not far from that. On the first, to be fair, the first night was quite posh. We got the ferry across and then slept in a nice ferry. But other than that, we then drove, and with the help, to be fair, of one of our my contacts in Poland, Lucas, is another logistician, actually. We've been able to then build a lot of more contacts through Poland, especially, where the convoy from the UK unloads, and then we reload in Poland, and with different vehicles and different team, we get into Ukraine. So we're not getting the team that's driving from the UK. It will even this week, it's not going to cross into Ukraine. That will be something that Mark, myself, and a few others will be doing.
And then, Mark, one thing I know you and I have touched on in conversation before is the security, not using your phones, not posting any of this till you were out of the hot zone. Do you want to add something about that?
So I think it's simplistic to say you're in a war zone, you've got to be careful, but you are in a war zone. You do have to be careful.
Yeah.
So it's like, it is a change of mindset. So obviously you're, having overseas UK Western phones is an issue because they can be tracked and you can be pin spotted from that. One of the things about modern technology is, so for instance, if you happen to live near a large army base or military base here in the UK or the States, wherever you're coming from, and may not have actually gone on to the base, but it can be logged that your phone was there and then logged again that it was in the Ukraine. And if you're on the other side of this conflict, that would seem like a possible target to be attacked, especially if there's 2 or 3 of you together. And I think that was one of the cases with the missile attack in Lviv. So, there is a security element, and it is a serious security element. So not using a mobile phone, UK or American or German registered phones in country, using local phone networks so that you don't sort of get flagged up on the, let's call them the opposition's sort of battle board as being a possible target. We went in relatively lightly the first convoy because we wanted to test our network and to start meeting people. But we're going for a more extended period on the second trip. And then, warfare is random, so you can cover your security as much as you like, but actually there is an element of risk. But it's being sensible. There's a curfew, so traveling at night wouldn't be a sensible idea, even if there wasn't a curfew. And it's just listening to local intelligence and getting intelligence in from the outside about where the conflict's moving to, where it's springing up to. But it is random. The opposition used lots of artillery and remote, causing damage remotely. So there's always the chance that could happen. But that's part and parcel of the undertaking.
We're getting continuous reports from our partners as well, like proper security reports. The plan is not fixed, which is a very important thing for us. We don't have like a set plan when we're crossing. We're going to keep it flexible, and it all goes depending on what happens on the day, and on the daily security reports as well.
Yeah, and it's exactly as you both say. It's maintaining that, it's preventing, planning to be safe, not using your phones. It's maintaining that situational awareness, and that you are in a conflict zone, and then adapting as the circumstances demand. Were there times that you said, "Oh, this is dicey. We should stay put, or we should deviate from what our planned passage was," or was it mostly we've planned to be as safe as possible, we're maintaining that situational awareness, that you're at high alert, but you've never really pushed to the edge? Or were there those moments where you're like, this is kind of a lot?
Well, there was. I mean, I suspect on the first convoy we were briefed by a friend with knowledge in this subject matter not to go anywhere near a sort of major hospital or an airport, or those kind of things that would make obvious targets. And of course, the first place we delivered to was a hospital on the edge of an airport in a military base. So it's kind of all 3 of those hot ticks, things we should have avoided. We were there straight away, and there was a sense that actually you needed that was definitely a potential target. So just being aware and actually just not staying there too long. When our job is done, once we've done our delivery, then scooting on to the next location, because it's of no value to anybody if we're there when something happens.
Can you please expand on the emergency action plans and security planning that was put into place? Did you have security personnel escorting you? Did you have a comms link to military personnel? Anything else you want to add on that front?
Luca, do you want to pick up on that one?
Yeah, so please explain emergency action plans and security planning. So do we have security personnel escorting us? No. We don't have security personnel escorting us. We have obviously our contacts and our friends and logisticians traveling with us. We are not, as we said, we're small, we're targeted, and we're working with the local community actually to deliver to places that we wouldn't be able to deliver to, or we wouldn't go ourselves, and the big organizations have actually struggled to get to. Think about Mariupol, Kherson, Kharkiv. We have managed to get some of our equipment in those places. So I don't know if that answered part of the question. From an emergency action plan perspective, we have different organizations that are in country, and we have contact with these different organizations, from security to government contacts to media contacts, and we get a lot of security reports from them and we basically ourselves put them together and create our picture of what the situation is. And then we've got communication with Ukrainian sources and Western sources, both on the ground. And we basically can build our own picture of what we can or we cannot do, or we can go or not go. A communication link to military personnel, yeah, we do, but we're not using them. Or there's no need for us to use them at the moment anyway.
Yeah, fair enough. So I want to talk a little bit more about the personal aspect of it now. Two questions. So the first one is, how are you preparing yourselves, very literally in terms of kit? Like, you must be packing very, very lightly for this, bringing very much the bare essentials. So that's the first question. And then the second part of it is how did you take care of yourselves from a mental health standpoint? Because what you're seeing is absolute devastation, lots of suffering. How did you make sure that you're coping with that appropriately?
Yeah, go, Mark. You go.
Well, in terms of packing, you're right. It's fairly lightweight. So, essentially, change of clothing, a sleeping bag, because you never know where you're going to end up sleeping. Credit card and money, so that you can move around. Then a head torch, and that's and aside from your passport, that's pretty much it. And obviously we're carrying sort of local phones, so that's pretty much all you need, isn't it? Really, it's the ability to be able to buy stuff if you need it, the ability to keep warm and dry, and the ability to operate at night if you need to exit somewhere quickly. And that's it really from the personal kit point of view. What was the rider to that question, Sean? I forgot the second bit.
The second part of that was the taking care of yourself from a mental health standpoint with everything that you're seeing and, the tight mission parameters.
I think some of it is and if I'm honest, I think probably we're moving so quickly at the moment, not much of this is having time to sink in. And we were operating in Western Ukraine where, whilst there's evidence of the conflict, there isn't the devastation that's happening in the east of the country. I think, and unfortunately, that perhaps is going to change. And also the parameters of what Luca and I are doing in terms of the mission might alter that. But at the moment, I think we're moving too quickly to really even appreciate and take that in. But it's a good question. It's something that will, as we sort of spend longer and go further into the country and deliver more deeply towards the front line, that we'll have to sort of be taking into consideration. Because you see this stuff on a day-to-day basis in terms of your work as the paramedic.
Yeah, so I don't have, and this obviously you got well known is a huge topic in health in general. What do you do at the moment? Nothing, just because I don't have the time to do anything. It's not. This is literally taking over our lives at the moment. On top of having full-time job and a family to look after, so it's not you don't have the time to think about it. A lot of what we, as also Mark said, we mainly operating in the West and then ourselves, and then with our connections, obviously, what we need to get to the East to get to the East. So we haven't really seen anything, I tend to say out of the ordinary, but I'm a paramedic after all. I tend to be, as an advanced paramedic, I tend to be sent to the, to the most critically ill patients. So I am used to see, I'm used to see bad stuff, if you like. So at the moment, it's not really, I don't really have any hints or tips or anything like that to give to anyone, just because I don't have time to, it's not sunk in yet what we're doing.
Yeah, fair enough. I think
to be completely honest, it's what it is.
I think that's an absolutely fair statement. I mean, I think even when this all first happened, the world didn't process what was happening. So that's absolutely relatable. So coming back to the first part of that question, when you're sleeping at night, like, are you sleeping in the back of the convoy? Are you sleeping with trusted contacts? Does it vary from night to night? Are you sleeping out in the open where it's maybe getting quite cold at night? Like, how does take us into the logistics of that?
So within the convoy getting to the border, it's mainly driving, and then with some of the contacts we've had a homestay with some lovely Polish friends, and then fire station that we've got access to, warehouses. Within Ukraine is actually wherever possible, because, as I said, the plan is very, how do you say, it can be changed at all times. We need to take into consideration curfews as well. So you might decide that you're going to leave to get to the next town, but if you can't make it within curfew, or you don't think you can make it within the curfew, then you're not going to go. So it's not like I'm going to book a hotel, or we're going to book whatever. We've got friends places where we got the option to stay with, and I mean Ukrainian friends within Kiev or Lviv or whatever else. Otherwise, is sit down in the car and sleep in the car or whatever. So it's that's why we got one sleeping bag with us, warm clothes, and a grab bag if you have to run, and that's about it. So there's not again a fixed plan for where we're sleeping. It can be anywhere.
Just a quick question: with the majority of the population speaking perhaps Ukrainian, did you wrestle with language barriers? Did you were your contacts well versed in the translation? Were they mostly English speaking? How did you approach that?
So I don't speak Ukrainian. I've been to Russia a few times. I've got a very minimal understanding of Russian. I do speak 5 languages, but none of them is useful where we're going. So it's mainly the niche, small little group of people that we deal with, and then expand it. They speak English fairly well, so we communicate with them. And to be fair, that's been enough so far. And I've just seen a question here actually about the experience in country, which I think is quite relevant to just what you just asked, the language, but also, have you ever been to Ukraine? No, I haven't, to answer to Kevin. I have operated in over 100 countries before, post-war zones: Afghanistan, Iraq, Sudan, Chad, Nigeria. So we're not close protections, we're not army. We are medics, and we're trying to deliver medical equipment where it's needed most. And our experience so far, what is really useful, our background, is to actually understand people and see who we can actually trust or not trust. And I know it sounds really silly, but it's that gut feeling that you get in your stomach. Can I trust this person? I cannot trust this person. And so far, has not failed us. I was actually sitting just in Lviv, and we brought 4 people together, 4 Ukrainians together. They're now working with us. None of the 4 of them knew each other before they actually got in touch with us. And now they are in contact several times a day on a daily basis, and they're making happen. So basically they are delivering medical supplies everywhere in the country, and they had no idea who they were before them that we put them together. So I don't know if that answered the question that Kevin has asked, but it's more like the previous experience in dodgy zone, if you like, call it whatever you like, but no, the in-country experience for me anyway wasn't there. And I've got quite a bit now though, if that helps.
Yeah, you've definitely been around the block, Luca. So I think it's fair to say that you've seen a lot. Mark, sorry, you were saying something.
Well, I think it's that the point that Luca made about trust is that everybody we're using comes reference from somebody else. They're a friend or a friend of a friend.
Vetted. Sorry, yeah, we do vet people as well.
So it's that's for a couple of reasons: to make sure that the stuff we deliver gets delivered where we expect it to be delivered, but also to make it accountable so that the people who are supporting us, also know that the money they're is going into kit that then gets delivered to where we say it's going to be, whether that's a bit vague in terms of the exact destination, but it goes to the front line.
And actually speaking about vetting with the kit, now we talked about, the number one rule, it has to, do no harm and, be very focused on the medical. Was there a certain also quality limits that you put in place that they cannot be expired? They have to be within usable within X amount of months. Was there a vetting process there?
There is, but it's not as strict as you may think. So for anything, obviously, medication is medication, period. With Festival Medical, who we work together with to do the trauma boxes, anything in there has to be, within, I think it's about at least 12 months expiration date or something like that, or something along those lines. But I'm actually quite pragmatic as well. And if I have been given, some field dressings that, they have expired, I am not turning my nose and saying, no, I'm not going to bring a bag of field dressings that can actually be used. And obviously, if they're 20 years old, it's a different matter. But, if it's expired a month or two ago, it's stuff that is life-saving or, they can help. I'm not going to throw my nose. So there are certain things that, yes, we're quite strict on. Other ones were more like, well, is this going to do any harm? No. So basically, we're not taking anything without checking it first. Yeah, would you agree, Mark? Would you be happy with that, Mark?
I would be happy with that. And also, just to highlight that Luke and I are kind of, it's hard for us to see the trees for the woods sometimes. So what we've got is Joe Rolls, who's our co-medical director, sort of just sense checking a lot of the stuff we do, making sure that the clinical governance is in place. He's not so involved in the day-to-day, and it gives him the ability to have a slightly more distance and pragmatic, skeptical view, I would say, just to make sure that we're doing what is right and proper as well. So there's a sense check in terms of having Joe oversee us.
A sense champion. I've never heard that term, but that's honestly the perfect term. In these extreme situations and conflicts, how does it affect the team dynamic? Does it bring out the best in your team? Are there more emotional aspects that kind of stress out the team and it affect your decision making? And also, are you armed? And if so, what are you carrying?
So we're not armed. We're non-combatants. And to be honest, if we were armed and we were stopped at a roadblock, that would probably cause more problems than would be solved by carrying a firearm. But in terms of Luke and I have worked together, but we've never worked together in this way. And so it is interesting when and these situations do this, don't they? They throw people together that erstwhile wouldn't be working side by side. And I think actually the team element of that is extremely important. So we need to be conscious, Luca and I need to be conscious of the way that we deal with each other and supporting each other. But we also need to be conscious that the people driving the trucks are volunteers. They come from disparate backgrounds and united by a common cause. And we need to be conscious of how we deal with them to make sure that they feel respected, involved, and thanked and loved, if that's the right word, because they're giving up their time and they're giving up, their lives for a short time to sort of assist us. So, the team element of this, both in terms of getting to the border and then across the border, is extremely important. And I guess Luke and I both, because of the experiences that we've had in the past in terms of leadership of expeditions and leading in extreme environments, makes us very conscious of the value of how we use language and how we interact with people. But to go back to this point, sometimes carrying a firearm would gives you a sense of reassurance, but actually would make you possibly look like somebody that you're not, as in, foreign forces or an agent or, a saboteur. So it's easier not to carry anything and just be, open-handed.
So here's a question. Actually, as you were saying that, talking about the team, how are you guys feeding yourselves? Do you have rations? Are you, just going with what's available locally? Did you not eat for the entire time?
No, it's what is available locally. I mean, there's a lot of people around, and we are not going into besieged cities or anything like that. And it's not what we're doing. It's not we're delivering into Ukraine, and then it's up to the Ukrainian team. We go as far as we can go safely, and then it's up to the Ukrainian team to decide where. And we can give our advice, we support them with it, but it's up to them to deliver it where they think it should be delivered. So they all, we can find food. Sometimes you might go for hours without, just because you're in the middle of nowhere on a road. It's not like, there's going to be a McDonald's here and a Burger King there. So one thing that, for example, I advise to the guys for the next convoy is to make sure that they got like a bag full of what they like, snacks-wise. So, you always have something there in case you really need it. If that makes sense. So that's part of what I actually bring in my backpack as well. I would have a few, protein bars or whatever. So yeah, no, we can eat. Not necessarily what we want, but we can eat, yes.
Fair enough. So this is actually really interesting because I know both of you have alluded to mission creep and, trying to stay focused on your ultimate mission. And some examples you've given is, Luca, just now you're saying not going any further than Western Ukraine and not going into the besieged cities. Mark, you talked about only strictly delivering the medical supplies, none of these bulletproof vests or bullets or anything like that. How much do you have to wrestle with mission creep at every step? And how do you maintain the discipline to say, no, this is what we're going to focus on so that we can get what we need to done without overtaxing ourselves?
I think the biggest thing is having to say no to people, because there are so many people that want to help and there are so many people that need help. But we have limited resources and energy, and we need, and we have a particular set of skills that are really quite useful at this juncture in time. So that's one of the things is when people say, can you take, or can you deliver, or can we have, is, there's actually saying, no, that's actually outside of our remit, trying to pass them on to people for whom that might be a focus. But there is always a temptation because you want to help. Our instinct, everybody's instinct is to help, is to say yes, and it is difficult to say no sometimes.
Every single request is read and every single request is bounced off. It's like Mark or Luca or whoever else. Like, I've got this. I don't think it's for us, but we would like to help. It's like, and it's a communication mark, isn't it? It's actually, we are on the phone, all the time, several times a day. And it's like, I've got these. It's like, is it really what we're doing? Is it sticks to our ethos, our mission statement? No, it doesn't. Right. Is there anyone that might be doing that rather than us? And you just sort of bounce off, and then it's like, there you go. There's someone that is looking for. If you want, it's up to you. But saying no is hard. It's not easy.
And I think that's probably for the people who are viewing and might be thinking of doing similar, is having that clear, defined goal and aim of what you're setting out to do and staying faithful to it. And maybe, we had the experience of doing this in Syria and to a degree for Myanmar with the live sessions, but also with other projects. Now, maybe for people who haven't done something like this before, is writing all that down actually right at the beginning and having it there to refer to when it gets slightly fuzzy around the edges or late at night when you're a bit tired and stuff, having that statement so that it refreshes what you're setting out to do.
And I think this is the perfect time to highlight as we get into the last 10 minutes here is, you guys are still doing amazing work. You've done your first 2 convoys, right? You have many more planned. So what are your needs right now? What are your asks? I know there's a link for it to donate. I know a lot of us from the WEM community have donated. What do you need? And specifically, Mitch is asking from the Q&A, should he save recently expired equipment from EMS work in case of emergencies? Are there programs that we can recycle these into to send to Ukraine, especially with the plastic like tubes, bag valve masks, eye gels, the airway stuff, IVs?
Luca, do you want to pick up?
I personally, especially for recently expired, probably not everyone would agree with this, but I wouldn't have a problem. I wouldn't put it on our trauma boxes or anything like that, but I would put them in big boxes at the warehouse, and then it's up to the doctors there if they want to use them or not. Because when you got absolutely nothing and that's all you got to use, yes, I would probably take it in, but I wouldn't put it in the equipment that we send frontline, right away within 24 hours. So yes, the question is yes. What we need, we are working on two ways. So, money, great. We got the GoFundMe page, put it there. I spent a lot of money in the last couple of weeks. I'm loving spending money, so that's what I mean. But at the same time, if you got trauma medical supplies that are of high quality and you want to send them to us, absolutely. Obviously, send us an email, tell us what it is, probably will ask photos, and basically we'll vet it, and if we think we can use it, we'll have it. And I think it's very important to add, sorry, Shawna, just because Mark, I'm sure, is going to say it, but I'm going to beat him to the post on this. When and Mark and Hannaford, they're actually covering everything that is not, that is actually the logistics for this, the vans, the ferry or whatever, it's all covered. Every single penny donated, it actually goes to medical equipment. Anything else.
I was going to say that I was in advance of this session, I was looking at both of your social media pages, so you might see a lot of likes from me. But that's what, I really, blew my mind, is that this is not an easy or cheap operation, and WEM is underwriting all of the admin costs, which is awesome, because so many times we see that, a lot of donations get spread a little bit thin. So props to the World Extreme Medicine Organization. How do you keep track of all of this constant stream of information, specifically the new people you meet, their intentions, the constant stream of information? Are you writing it down with pen and paper? Are you trusting your brains to remember it? Are you using Google Doc? Is it something else?
It's a really, really good question, and I'm trusting Luca.
It's a really, really, really good question. And I don't have a system yet because I've got absolutely overwhelmed. It's sort of like just by default became sort of like the head of operation of this thing. So I am trusting my brain, to be fair, and I'm trusting my experience with names and so on. But I gotta be honest with you, I don't have a problem asking a question 3 times if I have to. So especially in this weekend, we had a lot of very good partners that wanted to come in on board with us. So I've got thrown about 20 names. So I will need to start a Google spreadsheet at some point. But at the same time, I'm delegating. So we got our arms of the operation. We got our finance, we got our procurement, we got operations, and so on and so forth. So as long as I know who's the head of each one of them, I can keep an eye on what's going on. At the end of the day, you can't do it on your own.
No,
but
no way.
It is a really good question, because these are people who, as the question alludes, people that we haven't been working with for a long time, and they're friends of friends. It is a tricky thing, keeping track of everybody's, all of the conversations. But going back to what I said before, for myself and for Luca, in terms of our activities, it's just like 150% of our day now. So, a lot of our energy goes into following these conversations and building these relationships. And as you develop them, they get easier. That's the point.
Absolutely. So just in looking at the future convoys, so if I'm not mistaken, that first convoy was a 4-day trek from start to finish. Is that accurate?
I think it was. I can't remember actually. It's all a blur, as we were just driving the whole time. And obviously there was a border crossing going into Ukraine, did whatever we did there. It's all sort of turned into a blur, and it felt like the day after I was home already. But I think it was about 4 nights in total, 3 nights in total.
That's what I think I remember from your videos. You were alluding to being a little bit more complex with future convoys. Can you, as we wind down here, can you tell us about what the next set of mission objectives and convoys are going to look like in terms of length and complexity?
The complexity is that, so Mark and I are not going to drive on the convoy this time. We're going to meet the convoy, and we're going to focus more on the Ukrainian operation. As we had overwhelming amount of people that is offering their help, we would feel rude not to accept it. So we have obviously a team that is going to drive the convoy. We're going to meet them, and then at the border we're going to take over the operation with Ukraine. Just because we want to understand better how we're operating, and we want to get even more targeted if you can be. So that's the complexity, is overseeing an operation from the distance in this case, so not being with the convoy, or part of it anyway, part of the journey, and then it's sort of taking over and finishing their journey, if that makes sense. Mark?
Yeah, I think it became apparent that it wasn't sustainable for Luca and I to keep on driving backwards and forwards, and it wasn't best use of our time. So each convoy will have different volunteers on it, and will sort of be self-managing. So that sort of takes a bit of a logistical weight away from us. Mm-hmm. And as Luca said, our intention now is to focus more on delivering into Ukraine, making sure that we're delivering the right stuff to the right people, but also building personal relationships with those individuals so that we can have face-to-face conversations about what it is they need. So, literally hearing it from the horse's mouth.
So on that front, so we've heard of how we can, we have a very keen audience here who wants to help. We've heard of how we can donate. If folks have medical supplies that are relevant to your mission, how do they get in touch with you?
Just go on the GoFundMe page, and then I will get the message, and then we can take it onto our private emails if need be.
Perfect. And are you covered for personnel and team members at this time?
Got a waiting list. No, please send. If you want to help, like your time, want to drive. We have somebody's offered to drive their own, fill up their van and the driver. So they say, I'm gonna come, you can load my van, I'm gonna drive it. So if you want to offer it that way, I'm more than happy to put it on our waiting list. Absolutely.
And unfortunately, I think the our response is it's going to be this is not going to be over quickly. So while kind of Luca and I are in the kind of the birthing stages, we're kind of growing it. As time goes on, there's going to be a steady need for drivers and helpers, and it might well be that we might allow some mission creep if it's relevant in terms of providing remote training and advice, and that help is certainly very useful. If we can, we were really grateful to a doctor called Mark Willis, who's a neurosurgeon here in the UK. One of the neurosurgeons in the Ukraine near the front line badly needed to talk to a senior colleague, and to ring a friend, essentially. Now, Mark was amazing in so much as within 4 minutes of texting him, he pulled over, and we've managed to connect him with a neurosurgeon in the Ukraine. So it's we then step away from that relationship, but it's making those connections for people that then, they can develop into their own helpline.
I think that's a really sobering thought to, leave this session on as we wind down here today. Is, Mark, you and I were talking about this in conversation prior to the session, is that this, unfortunately doesn't look like it's going to be over within weeks or months. This could be, years in the making, and, just laying the groundwork to not just, help during the acute phase, but as the conflict escalates, as we've been seeing it. So that brings us to the end of our session. Thank you so much for joining us for a really critical WEM Live, talking about the work that WEM is doing, sending convoys of medical supplies to Ukraine. And all the best, Mark and Luca. You just keep us posted on how we can support and amplify the mission doing important work in a conflict zone.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Shawna, because I know you're exceptionally busy as well. So thank you for taking the time to join us this evening.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
If you've enjoyed this episode of the World Extreme Medicine podcast, please subscribe, like, and share. And if you want to meet lots of other risk-taking, rule-bending, and inspirational people, then you need to be in Edinburgh on the 19th to the 21st of November for this year's conference. Tickets are on sale now. Go to extrememedicineexpo.com to find out more.